Hi there, and thanks for listening to Leading Your Best Life with Lee Farnell. This is a fantastic interview with an old mate of mine, Greg Campbell. His book, Total Reset, is just brilliant. And so get ready for a real intellectual, cultural ride we're going to take right now. Get your notebooks out and then get ready to get hold of his book. Here we go. Well, folks, welcome to today's Living Your Best Life podcast. This is really, really special, particularly in the context of the voice referendum that's coming up in only a week or so's time. I'm with my old mate, Greg Campbell. Greg, how are you, mate?
Yeah, I'm very well, Lee. Lovely to be with you again.
Mate, look, what we're going to be talking about is this incredible book you have written, 31 years work, Total Reset, realigning with our timeless holistic blueprint for living. And I realized I start at the front and start working back. And then I see that there's actually three parts to it, because I'm waiting in part one, which talks about today's world. But then, of course, you talk about traditional landowners' world, and then you go to solutions and recommendations. So I was bathing in depression in the first part in terms of today's world. But let's get to that as we move on. But Greg, why don't you introduce yourself, because we know each other from 1985, but why don't you introduce yourself to our listeners, who are people who really want to lead their best lives. So who is Greg Campbell and where has he come from?
Well, Greg Campbell was born in Whadjuk country, that is Perth, in Scarborough in 1949. And as you can see, he's just now a silly old white fella. So when I was young, in fact 3 years old, I had the extraordinary experience one day of waking up in our two-bedroom red brick and tile home on its quarter-acre block, and running into the kitchen, jumped into my high chair to have cornflakes or whatever it was for breakfast, and looked up the other end of the little laminated table to see a huge black fella, 6'5", with cicatrices across his chest.
Wow.
Now, I'd never seen an Aboriginal person in my life. So for me, it was like, I didn't know. I thought maybe he comes from the stars. What is he doing here, this fella? And he looked at me and he said, "You must be little Greg." And a huge smile, and my heart completely melted. We spent the whole weekend together at home, and he was showing me how to throw boomerangs, amongst other things. And on the second day, before he left, he looked at me, and his misty eyes became completely clear, and something went into me. And I don't know what he did or what it was, but I know it was a pivotal moment in my life at 3. He had come down from the Midwest to have a heart operation at Royal Perth Hospital. Native Welfare Department had flown him down. And our home phone number was the emergency number for that department. That's where Dad worked. And he had been stuck on Perth tarmac, missed his Jupiter, his name was, the Aboriginal man of high degree, had missed his plane, and so they got a call from the airport. So Dad said, I'll go and get him and bring him home for the weekend, and we'll put him on the Monday flight. And that's what happened. So 20 years later, having gone through Scarborough Primary School, Hale School for 5 years, thanks to Dad working at 3 jobs, and then UWA, studying law for a few years before I realised it definitely wasn't for me. I found myself down near Margaret River one day, went there for the first time in my life with my mate Russell and his girl at the time, Shelley, to go surfing. But I never got to go surfing that day because I was bitten by, well, at the time I thought it was a big black snake, about 5 metres long, huge. I didn't know for many years after that it was not a physical snake at all. It was the rainbow serpent. And
wow.
Yeah, and it bit me on the foot about 6 o'clock in the morning when the others were asleep. And I thought, well, I've just been bitten by a huge black snake. Where we are here, we've got no communications. Our car's bogged a couple of kilometres away. Got no way out for a few hours. I'm dead man walking, half an hour for something like that to do. So I thought, well, I guess my only choice is where do I want to die? So I thought, okay, I'll go and sit on the beach there. So I went down, crossed the dunes, sat on the beach and waited to die. And a couple of minutes later, I was no more sitting on the beach. Instead, I was an old fella, late 50s, dying in pain on a mud floor. I don't know where, no one around. And I actually experienced that last 30 minutes or so of dying. And it was painful. So when it was over, the moment that was done, I was back on the beach again, sitting with my legs crossed, about 10 metres from the waters lapping on the beach, and wondering what on earth was going on. Was I dead and just thinking I was sitting on the beach, or was I actually dead on the beach? You know, what is this? What's happening here? So I was completely confused and exhausted by that experience. But only a minute or two later, no longer sitting on the beach again, this time about 440, 50 years ago, another fella dying in a more comfortable bed, people gathered around crying. It wasn't exactly a pleasant experience. And then when that was done, I was sitting on the beach again. Now I'm completely exhausted. I don't know what's going on. I think I'm probably dead, and this is part of whatever happens when you die. A few minutes later, bang, next one, 300 to 380 years ago. And it went like this six times over until by, I don't know when, 10 o'clock in the morning. This was 104 degree Fahrenheit and a 39, 40 degree day. And I was just sitting there with a pair of bathing shorts on, but I wasn't feeling any heat. And after the sixth event, I was sitting there completely gone. And a voice with no words said to me, "What do you really want?" Well, I thought about that a lot. And I thought, well, you know, all I really want is to be with my beloved, Lisa, who became my wife a couple of years later for 30 odd years until she passed of cancer. I just want to be with Lisa. She was in Paris at the time. And the voice said, "That's fine. You can be with her right now if you wish, but if you want that, you must die." Well, I'm thinking, then in that case, I'm not dead. Now, do I die for the love of my life, or do I live for the love of life?
It's a big question.
Yeah. So for whatever reason, after contemplating it really deeply, I said to that voice, I said, "No, it's okay, I'll live." And instantly everything flipped. And I was suddenly about 100 metres all around was my body, including the little fella sitting on the beach. And that was accompanied by an explosion of extraordinary ecstasy or bliss or joy, whatever you want to call it, you know. And I was trembling in that beautiful space, and then whoosh, another few minutes, and now it was a kilometre all around, and the bliss had doubled. And then 10 kilometres, another few minutes, 100 kilometres. And it went on like this about 33 times until the whole universe was in view, including the past and the future hundreds of millions of years each way. When I say the whole universe, not the whole universe, a lot of the universe was in view. And it was all present now, and it was me. That's not this me who's sitting here at the moment. That's the me that is the me of every one and everything that exists, the universal self, basically, that energy or intelligence or power that is at the substratum of physical reality. So that rainbow serpent gave me the wonderful, joyful experience of access to looking at reality through its eye.
Whoa.
Through its eye. And its eye, looking at itself, you see, all of it is comprised of that. That is our oneness. That is the sacred ground of all. So, you know, by 4 or 5 in the afternoon, when my friends appeared, having spent all day trying to unblock the car, I was in an extraordinary state. I remember when I came back down through those layers, those 33 layers that peeled off successively as consciousness kept expanding,
Mm.
started to contract and came back down until I was again 100 metres all around looking at that little fella sitting on the beach. And I couldn't see any reason to re-enter the physical body, because it was just like, why the hell would you want to go on the roller coaster ride of that when you can sit in this space and just, be. So, but the body stood up and urinated and pulled me back in. The body has its own destiny, its own karma.
Yes.
So there was obviously a reason for that, and the reason took another 20 odd years to emerge in the form of Total Reset, because as soon as that happened, I returned home that evening with my friends, and on my doorstep was a book, or a brown paper package, literally, with a book inside it addressed to me. I opened it up. It said Play of Consciousness by Swami Muktananda. So I didn't know what the hell it was doing there or where it come from. And so I just opened it at random. I started reading towards the rear a passage where someone was recounting a dream she'd had. And she said to him, last night I had a dream I was bitten by a snake. These are first words I read. Huh?
Wow.
What does it mean? And he says, well, it's very auspicious. It's a sign of, awakening of the Kundalini, Shiva's grace, that sort of thing. In their world, they explain it that way.
Yes.
So I turned to my friend Russell and said, well, I've got to go to India. Now, that's how it was. It's not what I wanted. I had no previous notions about going to India at all. It would have been great if a traditional Aboriginal elder had entered my life at that point, but that wasn't to be for another 20 odd years.
Yeah.
And I got put through a whole thing for 20 years of preparing to meet that old man, Lulu, or Paddy Rowe, great West Kimberley Aboriginal elder, so that I could do this work. And that 20 years meant I stayed a couple of years in the traditional ashram, as it then was, in India, then came back into the world. I got married, worked in the Australian Public Service, finished up in Canberra, started to teach people in Canberra without charge meditation during lunchtimes. It became very popular. People got to hear about it at all levels, including a billionaire in Melbourne by the name of Richard Pratt, the late Richard Pratt. They saw that reports were coming in from generals in the army and senior bureaucrats and others that there was something in what this fellow was offering in terms of mental preparation, in terms of people's ability to perform under pressure, that sort of thing. So that was very appealing. And I was invited to go to Newport, Rhode Island in '83 when Australia won the America's Cup, and I was involved in mental preparation activities and so on with one of the three Australian teams that challenged Richard Pratt's Challenge 12 team. Damien Fuster, who I trained, finished up sailing on the bow of Australia 2, spoke very nicely afterwards of the benefits of what he'd received in his training, this sort of thing. So then the corporate worlds started to ring me. We really got you to motivation, change our culture, So I thought, okay, I said to Liz, time to leave the public service. I'm going to go work in business for 5 years, no more, and then we'll see where we're sitting. And so that's what I did, Lee, and that's when I encountered you in that first or second year of that activity, when I'd won the massive Telstra or Telecom cultural change contract, and needed quite a few full-time staff to deliver it. And I was very impressed by a public talk you gave at a main conference in Sydney, and you very kindly accepted the offer to join the team of the 9 consultants and our media team as well. So 5 years came and went. I looked at our bank account. I said to Lisa, yeah, that's enough. And I never returned to work again. Contemplated, which is when you knew me in Dalkeith and we had the, river views, swimming pool, tennis court, home, yes, blah, 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 which Lisa loved very much. I realised one day that the time had come to meet that traditional Aboriginal elder, because the voice of Jupiter kept sounding inside me. Mm-hmm. So around 1991, I thought, well, I said to Liz, I'm going up, to the Kimberley for a few weeks, because my mother had given 3 names from her high-level Aboriginal Canberra contacts of widely respected Aboriginal elders who happened to be in the Kimberley, all in the Broome area, West Kimberley. So I went up there to meet them, and there was only one there at the time, sitting under a tree, tamarind tree, near the Kimberley Aboriginal Law and Culture Centre offices. The receptionist took me over there, introduced me to Lulu. He stopped making his boomerang and stood up and gave me a very sweet, warm welcome, as he did with anyone who ever came, whoever they were, and asked me to sit with him on the ground there, which I did for the rest of the day. And we chatted away, and we chatted for a couple of weeks every day. I went there 8, 9 in the morning till 5, 6 in the evening while he was making his lizards or shields or boomerangs, and people were coming and going. Lulu was already 79 years of age when I met him in 1991. He was truly a traditional Aboriginal elder, carrying the knowledge that our First Peoples have been carrying from day one. You know, not 9 generations, which is how long, or 10 generations that non-Indigenous people have occupied Australia. We're talking about 2,600 generations plus. So you'd think they might have acquired a bit of knowledge about how to live right on Earth, you know, and they did, because for tens of thousands of years they did not mess up the environment. They did not bring toxins in. They did not engage in wars of conquest and control. They regarded every single individual as sacred. And gave people the ethics and the means and the knowledge and the experience and the understanding to operate and function as ethical beings who take full responsibility for their actions. So their blueprint was excellent in every way. So Lulu received all that knowledge from Bulu. Bulu was his tribal father. Bulu was married with children before any non-Indigenous people moved in to settle the Kimberley. In other words, Bulu was holding indisputably untwisted knowledge going back to the very beginning. And that really interested me because Lulu was holding that knowledge. Lulu being raised in the bush, initiated in the bush, was the law boss, or one of the law bosses or senior law keepers for the law of two different regions. He spoke 7 languages. He was consulted by anyone who came to Broome with questions about land or culture. So he had that level of standing. I was very privileged to meet him. And then when a few weeks later he said to me, I think it might be a good idea you and I work together with my people to write one book. I chuckled. I said, but Lulu, I'm not a writer, you know. He said, he said, you will be at the end of this, Bubba. So I thought, well, fair enough. I said, what's the book about? And he said, well, you know, Bubba, we can see a long way, us old people. Well, I knew, in a sense, what he was talking about because of what had happened to me in Margaret River. I realised there was an entire other window through which one could gain knowledge and understanding. In fact, that is the ground of wisdom, that window. So he said, you know, big problems on Earth now. He said, a lot of trouble coming. He said, and we got to do something about it. You can't just let the whole thing go down. I said, yeah, well, there's quite a few people who are starting to see this trajectory we're on is unsustainable. It's evidently disastrous. And you mentioned part 1 of the book, where a lot of that data is laid out. And it's depressing to see across the board in so many areas, environment, personal, mental health, you know, inequities and so on. It's disturbing. So he said, really, only way out of this one is people got to sit on the ground at the bottom of everything.
Sit on the ground at the bottom of everything.
Sit on the ground at the bottom of everything. He said, when you're sitting on the ground at the bottom of everything, you can see and you can feel. So I was mystified by what he meant quite a while, by the ground at the bottom of everything. He was sitting there all the time. He was in the dreaming of the dreaming. It's like looking at everything through the eye of the rainbow serpent as well as through his own 2 eyes.
Wow.
So he connected, completely connected. And for him, this was not extraordinary at all. This was completely natural. He said to me, this is how people are naturally. like this. All our people were like this, Some a little bit more connected than others, but all understand that ground at the bottom of everything. And they know that they're connected to it through their lian. And he would rub his hand around his tummy, his belly, and say, here, power in the belly, lian.
Yeah.
He said, this is where we're connected to everything.
Power in the belly.
Yeah, power's in the belly.
Lian.
Hara, they call it in Japan. Lian, Liyan in the West Kimberley region.
Yes.
So Lian is like the channel which is very open when you're a little baby. So it's actually why little babies are so delightful to be with, and old Lulus are so delightful to be with, because that Lian channel's completely open.
The Lian channel.
There's and open means there's no longer separation between the individual and the whole. The individual and the whole are one entity rather than being two separate things.
Yes.
So that duality consciousness, which is prevalent in our culture and times, is not a predominant aspect of traditional Aboriginal people at all. So I said, well, how we get people to sit on the ground at the bottom of everything? He said, well, we get them to walk together, us and you fellas, black fellas and white fellas. He always called non-Indigenous people referred to as white fellas, their skin colour. He said, we've got to learn to walk together on living country, because this country is fully alive. You fellas, you white fellas, you think, well, the kangaroo's alive and the tree's alive and that bush alive, but not the rocks, not the earth, not the water, not the sky. He said, no. He said, that's that thing, that you fellas have. He said, no, it's all alive. Everything conscious. Country, living country smells you, he would say, when you come in. It smells you. And it knows whether you got the smell of country or not. That's why you see it widely across Australia. Before anyone begins something on country, they smoke themselves, under the armpits in particular. You smoke yourself. Why? To give your smell of country, to take on the smell of country, so country knows you. And when it knows you and it says, oh, you got my smell in family, it looks after you and shows you things and helps you in all sorts of ways, which you would just say is, oh, that was fortunate that happened, or, that was a sort of a synergistic occurrence, how lucky I am. We don't attribute authorship to anything that's not living. So on the contrary, if you don't have smell of country, you come into country, you think, what's this fella doing here? You not belong here. Must be up to no good, maybe. So drop a big tree branch on you, or you have a car accident, or a snake gets you, or whatever, So, that was just unfortunate, an accident. No, the system's all connected. It's all connected, everything. We're only aware, I think, of 1% of the level of connectedness that exists, and we base our lives on that.
Wow, there's so much you've said there, Greg. I mean, here we are right now, and I'm just going to share the screen because there's a couple of great things I've got here. One, of course, is your fantastic website, but I want to go to the Uluru Statement, because literally the Uluru Statement talks about walking together. And, of course, the statement's so beautiful in itself, but you having spoken about the importance of it, and here it is, we invite you to walk with us in a movement. I've heard Thomas Mayo just recite this, and I cried. It's so beautiful.
Well, there's a reason for it that goes far beyond what most Australians are thinking right now. Right now, we think, okay, we've got to be decent human beings and finally recognise, in our constitution, not theirs, in our constitution, the existence of Aboriginal people, etc. Right? Well, that's a good thing, and yes, they should have a voice in matters affecting their lives. Yeah, well, that's a good thing. Yeah. So, we're being good. Yeah. We're being moral. We're being decent human beings, not like our ancestors were when they were killing them en masse. But that's not the reason. The reason is, as part 2 of Total Reset pretty clearly lays out, is that our first peoples are holding knowledge that constitutes effectively the blueprint for all Homo sapiens, all humans on this planet.
Yeah.
They interpreted that blueprint in at least 500 different ways across Australia, but they were all aligned with it. So, we had completely different language groups and customs and cultures in the southwest of Western Australia as against the north of Queensland. Different stories, everything, all different nations, different languages, etc. So it's not that the beauty about about accessing that knowledge that was basically carried by humans from the beginning is that if we apply it according to our own history, circumstances, etc., appropriately, we will have no wars of conquest and control. We will not have environmental damage, and we will not have broken hearts and minds. That's as clear as can be to me. So we're looking at solutions, many solutions to many issues in our world. And no sooner did we come up with a solution to one, then another one hits us, another one hits us, and so it goes. It's like cancer cells, almost out of control. We whack one, but another one pops up, and so on. So the thing is to remove the root of the problem. And the root of the problem is this duality consciousness, which sees people as separate from nature, with having the superior rights over all that exists, creating people who are divided within themselves, with others, with the natural world, and deny the existence of anything beyond physical reality. That is really fatal. And it's tragic that over the last few millennia, so many religions have come into being that have ultimately been institutionalised and turned to suppress people's direct experience of that reality and replace it with mind theologies and so on and so forth. That is very, very sad, because the ground at the bottom of everything is that non-physical reality, the experience, the direct experience of that. And that is what happens to young Aboriginal boys who reach usually around puberty when they begin the process of being initiated into the law, the universal law. In the East, they call it Dharma, law of the dreaming in Australia, first law. Also earth law, people call it, the natural law. So around 12, 13, 14, typically Aboriginal boys were, and in many places in Australia still are, at the beginning of the process of being initiated into that secret sacred realm, and also being initiated into the rights and obligations of adulthood. That initiation into the sacred goes on their entire life. Old men, very old men, are still learning. So that's how deep it goes. The stories that you read in Total Reset, numerous stories from real life stories and Dreamtime or dreaming stories that Lulu wanted to take into the public domain, provide some very interesting insights into the nature of reality and how everything works, and goes as far as Lulu could go without transgressing the law. So there are many deeper levels of understanding and knowledge, but with Total Reset, we've gone as far as we can go at this point in human evolution.
Well, I mean, as you say, everything from, I know on the website that there's a fellow that was a prisoner that kept escaping by changing body shaping to a bird or a cat. You go, what is all that about? And
he was a Maban man. A Maban man is Maban is called in the Kimberley. He's a shaman. It would be in South America, Central America, shaman.
Yep.
A person with those powers. Now, it's not that the person themselves has those powers exclusively. We all have all the powers. Every human being has extraordinary power that goes far beyond what the physical laws tells us is possible.
Yes.
But everyone has it, but not everyone can access what's inside themselves, or can to a certain degree.
Yeah.
So some people are natural healers. It doesn't matter what culture. Aboriginal or all other cultures, you get people who are naturally healers. They're terrific. They're connected. Their lianes open at that point, at least when they're doing that work, and something very magical can happen. We would say, oh, that was a miracle, or da-da-da. No, these powers are there all the time, because there's nothing other than what Lulu called Bugarigara, the dreaming. So Bugarigara is the word in the West Kimberley. Chukurpa in the Central Desert, knitting down here in Noongar lands. So, the Bugarigara is central to human existence on this earth. If we don't know it, we're doomed. Doesn't matter what we call it by name. It always exists, it's always present, and it's always knowable, no matter the time.
Yes. I mean, as you say, that world, this whole Newtonian world of if you can't see it and you can't measure it, it doesn't exist. Yet I just, my basics of science is, the electromagnetic spectrum has only a small fraction of it that's actually visible. And there's this whole other invisible component that exists that we think to say, well, if we can't see it, it can't be real. But of course, it's there, and therefore vibration, energy. I mean, I understand it at a superficial level, but even from the early days when we worked together, we often talked about you don't manage people, you manage energy, because you can have their bodies in the room, but where is their energy, and how much of that energy has come, and where's the focus of that energy, and so often when we talk to managers, go, listen, don't think just because you have bodies here that you have energy. It's like, how do I activate that energy? How do I get it then aligned so that it's moving in the one direction towards some worthy goal, which of course we did with Telecom and Vision 2000 to say, how do you get 90,000 people focusing their energy on somewhere near one goal? And interestingly enough, of course, that vision was well and truly achieved by the year 2000. To be the best enterprise, the most admired, most successful. It was at that point in time, it was the most successful enterprise by every measure almost. Of course, it's changed again, because what happens? Human beings revert back and power play goes on. And so on. And of course, this whole thing of, as you say, oneness versus this we've got the American model right now, winners and losers, and who can actually live in a gold layered tower in New York with their own family name on the front of that building, knowing in fact it's a complete and utter facade. Talk about karma. This Trump show is one of the greatest displays of karma that you'd ever imagine. Here's this guy who's literally undermined his own democracy. Now, again, people can tell, you can't say that, Lee. But in terms of as you say, in terms of oneness versus ego versus individualism, winners and losers. So, Greg, let's talk a bit about, because straight away you've talked about initiation and this whole principle of Lian. One of the young guys in the surf club actually has spent time up in the Kimberley. He come from Christchurch, and his name's Lockie Cook, and he has a business called iYarn, and he uses like an app essentially to get people to open up and reflect, because I heard a version of that Lian, as in we sit and we open up and we reflect and we connect, which is exactly what we're doing with our Blokes Talk Beachside men's mental health group of guys. Let's just create a safe space for guys to talk, which of course I'm sure Indigenous people have sat under trees, probably the males and females, but again, I know there's women's business and men's business, because let's just talk blokes for a second. What we know in the Western world is 40% of men have never discussed their inner world, how they feel, happiness, sadness, stress, anger, let alone who am I, where do I fit in. 40% of men have never discussed it to anyone, and yet 75% of suicides are men. And you go, hang on, is there correlation? There's certainly correlation. Is it causation? There's certainly that link of how do you sit, let alone your principle. We've talked about this before. Young boys, there's no initiation. There's no who am I as a man? What are my roles as a man? How do I deal with hardship as a man? How do I rely on each other as a man? So in terms of moving forward and solutions, and I know I've jumped to the back of the book just to go what's in part 3. Certainly one of the parts you talk about is the gap year, the initiation, the walking in the dream time. Let's talk about some of those solutions, but let's start with that in terms of, let's say, boys and men's mental health as a starting point moving forward.
Well, when you know the ground at the bottom of everything, you no longer have mental health problems. Suicide was extremely rare in traditional Aboriginal culture.
Sure.
The resolution of issues related to the emotions and the ego, like guys not being able to talk to one another in our culture as easily as women do, for example, about the emotional issues in particular. You can see the biological strands of that going way back to hunters, being tough and taking on the big animals and, being brave and not talking about, stuff there. But the initiation that's needed is the direct experience of the ground at the bottom of everything. And the way that Aboriginal people did it and do it is, I think, the most practical, and that is entering into relationship with country. Now, country with a capital C means earth, skies, water, material and non-material entities. The whole thing, the whole system is country. So if young boys, if you want to talk boys, around, end of year 7, before they go to secondary school, had a year off, a gap year, and were invited by Aboriginal families to enter the law and go through that whole process, they at least would have the experience of what's on the ground at the bottom of everything. Know what it means to sit there. And that experience will come through ceremony and through the protocols of what's called business. And the ceremonies will invariably involve singing and dancing and perhaps body designs and things that we can't talk about. So,
yes, of course.
The thing is, at the end of the first round of initiation, the young boy's consciousness will have been shaken to the core. The untrammeled ego, which is starting to dominate their life, at 13, 14.
Testosterone's kicking in.
Yeah, all that stuff, right? The energies being released, which can be destructive in the mental domain, are brought under control by the greater power within that has been awakened. So the greatest healer of all is within each of us all the time. We don't need anything else or anyone else. It's all there if we can reconnect with who we really are.
Yeah.
So Lulu's solution was get people to walk on country with us. So he started the Lurujari Heritage Trail in 1987, and it continues to this day 3 times a year. Anyone's invited to join the Gallara Blue people, not inexpensive, to walk for 9 days, 9 nights along an 80-kilometre section of this Great Song Cycle, that section running from Broome about 80 kilometres north. Lulu and his family have the cultural knowledge of that whole space. They became its custodians in the 1930s when the old traditional owners had no more children to look after things. The kids had all been taken away to missions and so on. So, yeah, spending 9 days on country with people who experience it as living country is a powerful way to open up to who we really are and what we're about. Many other alternatives. There are thousands of places in Australia, tens of thousands, including in the Perth metro area, which have real power in their own right. Some of them are very benevolent powers and some are malevolent powers. In terms of the places of benevolent power, if one was to go and sit there in the bush with a campfire, from a Friday afternoon to a Sunday evening, with nothing, no mobile, no one, just yourself and some water and maybe a bit of tucker if you don't know what to get from the bush, and just sit under that tree or beside that stream, that place that really feels good when you sit there, that you'd like to go back again and again to that place and sit there. This time you go and sit there and do nothing. Don't think.
The power of place and the power of silence.
With the old man, often, we many times went on country every week, a number of days. Often we would sit there for hours, just the two of us, and not say a word. It was so delicious being in that field of energy of someone who's connected with the bottom of everything. To me, it's the ultimate healing power. It blows away so much rubbish. It just consumes it. So sitting with the old people, when they do speak, it's usually, to make a joke or some funny thing, or, it's like endlessly light and playful. Being with Lulu was like being with a 5-year-old, on one hand. I mean, he was extremely tough human being, to say the least, and had a heart that was so compassionate and soft and generous, non-judgmental. It didn't matter who came before him, human or otherwise. Snake, for example, you could have a deadly snake come. Not an issue for Lulu. He was with a film crew one day. They were filming him. Now they went up to Kundundo, about 50 kilometres north of Broome, just a kilometre or two in from the ocean on Minari Road. And they were filming away, and the sound recordist was there, and France, who's a great, Lulu's great Dutchman, who's Lulu took into the family decades ago and was this interface with the non-Indigenous world, called out, "Hey, don't move." And there was a huge black king brown coming from behind the sound recorders towards him. And so then Lulu took over. He said, "No, Bubba, just move a little bit towards me, slow, just nice and easy. No one say anything." And he did that, and he was safe. And then the king brown was coming towards him, and then Lulu stepped forward, and in language he started speaking. And the king brown stopped, lifted its head, had a good look. Lulu talked for about 30 seconds in language, and put its head down and turned away and went into the bush. And I said to Lulu, "Wow, that's amazing, Lulu." I said, "Can I do that?" He said, "Nah, you're not talking English."
Yeah. Well, just that alone. I mean, again, you talk about the rainbow serpent, but in the last 3 or 4 years, I've spent more and more time. You guys, as you say, went to India way back with Muktananda, but I've been immersing myself in Sadhguru, an Indian yogic, and again, he talks about the snakes, and that with the right energy. And again, I wouldn't dare risk it myself, but with the right energy, talking to or dealing with snakes, because as you said, a dog picks up fear And the same being with the snake. Animals are smelling your, in fact, the Indians call it, don't they, vasana, or something to that effect, where what is the energy? What is the vibration you're putting it out? What are we smelling on you before you even open your mouth? And that's that invisible factor. So, mate, there's so much to talk about here. So, in terms of some of the other things, as you've talked about, well, what's coming up for me is I've told you in previous conversations, my wife Catherine has known for a long time that her great grandmother was Aboriginal, and at the weekend, again, talk about chance. A mate that I was swimming with, Cole, we're at the coffee shop, Bay Merchants in Albany, and Cole's mate Tony stops by. Kath starts talking to Tony and finds out he's also a Fitzpatrick. And he goes, hang on, and they actually work out they're from the same family line, except he said there were 3 Fitzpatrick Irishman brothers that came out in the latter part of the 1800s. They're working in and around Albany, and one of them falls in love with the local elder's daughter and ends up marrying this Jane. And I've seen the wedding certificate talking about truth-telling and history, what went on. On the wedding certificate, Jane, formerly Aboriginal, and that whole family. So the Fitzpatricks, all these, so Kath's grandfather, Tom, there's 11 of them born. Tom captain coaches the North Albany, and I cry when I think of it. There he is, Aboriginal, captain coaches North Albany premiership team. For the next 40 years, people would tip their hat in the street at this great man, but pretending that, of course, because he's such a good bloke and he's been so good in white society, that he's not Aboriginal. And these people had to deny their family. And you know how close and what mob and what family mean to Aboriginal people. They had to deny it. But in amongst all of that, Kath's always said she's loved going to the Gap. There's something special about the Gap. And what we find is that through the local, because Kath is now been registered as whatever it is, acknowledged as a local Aboriginal, and we find that mob, the princess, or the elders, and that mob literally spent time at the back of the Gap in a place which is now called Lime Burners Grove, which is now actually a marriage. They've turned it into a marriage centre. The local guy let us in because it's private property, and he's got this absolutely beautiful area, open air, beautiful big trees that clearly have been there for thousands of years. And because of the ledge at the back, it protected the whole area from the wind. Yet they could go over there. They could live in the caves. The lime was burnt from the thousands of years of shells that the Aboriginal people had collected for their food, and then they burnt the lime and made it into a mortar to build the houses in and around Albany. But Kat, again, I get emotional. One of the elders said to Kat, "Walk with your shoes off. Walk on your ancestors' country," and it was so moving to be in that place, where her ancestors had clearly been for thousands of years. Yeah. And so your point about walking on country, and what I love about the welcome to country is that whole piece of we're custodians of the land. You do not own land. The concept of land ownership versus, no, we're just custodians. And as you then say, it's a living entity. And then we want to acknowledge elders, past, present, and emerging. Just that set of words of you're connected here in a river of elders, and therefore there's a responsibility not only for the present leaders but the emerging, which then puts it back to the young males and females. That, hey guys, you're connected in this long line here. So your thoughts and comments on that?
It's very difficult for people in our culture to acknowledge the depth of influence that Aboriginal people have had on this country. The extent of the energy that they've poured into this place. If we even had a glimpse of what's gone into it, we would never walk outside, that's to say other than on a footpath or a road, with shoes on or sandals or thongs. We'd walk barefoot. Every year throughout the continent, people sung the country. They travelled those song lines, the song cycle. They met on them and did business. They sang and they danced country non-stop, year after year, decade after decade, century after century, millennia after millennia, for at least 65,000 years, we know as a fact, but old man tells me, Lulu told me a lot longer than that. So Australia, is the oldest country on earth. 4.2 billion year rock samples in the Pilbara. Stromatolites, 6 billion years up to Exmouth Way. And the oldest continuous culture on earth. A lot older than, the old people say, a lot older than what we know to be the case at the present time. They say it goes right back to the beginning, and it was not apes out of Africa. It was human beings out of Australia.
Wow.
So this knowledge is not fanciful knowledge made up because people didn't have a science to penetrate and carbon date things. This is knowledge that comes from people who are looking at the whole picture, past, present and future, all of it.
Yeah.
It is priceless. And that's why Aboriginal culture and people need to be respected. They're the holders of the wisdom that enables the survival of all life on this earth. Lulu made it really clear to me over and over again that the principal purpose of human beings was to maintain the balance of all life on earth, and it is why we hold the capabilities that we hold as a species. So we can have fun and enjoy ourselves and all that good stuff, yeah, great. But not at the expense of discharging our primary obligation while we're able to plan and imagine and all these things, capabilities we have. It's to maintain the balance of all life on earth first and foremost, full stop.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a massive, as you say, that puts the word custodian into massive context. And as you say, and as Sadhguru says, here is just this human mechanism, probably the most advanced, one of, if not the most advanced piece of engineering on the planet, and it can be used either way.
Yeah.
I mean, certainly one of the things he's been talking about is protecting the biodiversity in the topsoil, which I take this year. One of my mates put me onto that Dark Emu book in terms of when the Aborigines first saw white men ploughing up the field, immediately could see that those big chunks of soil are going to lead to erosion of the topsoil. What are you doing to this precious living entity, which, by the way, that's one of the other talk about paradigm, how you early on in the book or one of your other interviews, you talked about how the Aboriginal people saw the environment as a member of the family. It's, as you say, a living, breathing entity. And as you've said in one other place, and like any other member of the family, you take care of it, as distinct from, I know it's there to be exploited and owned. I know it's a member of the family. And so this whole protecting this topsoil on the basis that if you don't protect the topsoil, we turn the joint into a desert. So some of the other action points we just touched on. So how do you propose? Let's just say touch on some of those parts of part 3. How do you propose from here on in? Here we are sitting a week away from the yes vote. One of my mate, he's a Scottish third-generation Robert Menzies. He's being mildly facetious because he said, "I'm about to go and vote this morning." And so in one short paragraph, define for me Aboriginal culture. And I know he was being facetious, and I said, "Well, again, thanks to you." I said, "Well, one part that I understand is, the environment is a living, breathing entity, as my mate Greg has said, and it's a member of the family, and therefore the environment needs to be cared for. That's a critical part of and the whole concept of oneness. We are all one. We're interconnected. He goes, good summary. In other words, he had not heard or felt or seen that explanation. And of course, he's one of 25 million Australians. Let's assume at least 20 million have not actually really thought at all in any deep way, particularly, as you say, not only thought but experienced that sitting at the tree or sitting with elders. And by the way, I was watching a documentary the other day, and one of the people said, well, the elders said, we can't have reconciliation because reconciliation, and again, they just said, we can't have reconciliation because they never got to know us in the first place. You know, and I went, wow, how profound is that? Because, of course, I want reconciliation with an old friend. Well, you know, versus, but we've never actually sat in the tree. We've never gone walking. We've never got to know each other. This isn't about reconciliation. This is about getting to know each other in the first place.
Well, that's right. I mean, Lulu was regarded by many as the father of reconciliation in Australia, but his form of reconciliation is not, one mob has got to be reconciled with another mob because that one's in the wrong and that one's in the right, or that's the just one and that's the unjust. You know, the play of duality is just endless. No. Reconciliation means we all share the experience together of the real, of the essence of country. We all experience its power. We all learn how to walk on it and feel coming through our feet. There's the only way you can feel it if you're standing on the ground is bare feet, is the energy of country comes into us. When we go for a swim in the ocean, the energy of the ocean comes into us, or in a river or in a lake, right? So from his point of view, reconciliation was about people sharing the experience of that which is beyond the apparent physical level of reality. Digging deeper, he would say. If you dig below the surface, you're going to find the black soil inside. So dig a little deeper, he would tell everyone who come to the beginning of a Burujari Heritage Trail walk. See if you can dig a little deeper in the next 9 days. At the end of the walk, when it was over, he'd always ask me one question. He would say, "Can they see?"
Yes.
Can they see? So the old people could see all right, and they spent a lot of time sitting quiet, not thinking, just pure feeling, completely connected, like a little baby connected to the whole thing, just pure feeling. A very, very beautiful space, and it's in every human being. In that space, your mental health issues just disappear. It literally eats them up. It dissolves them. Yeah.
Well, coming back to thinking and stillness, literally on Monday night, my son James and I went to a young friend who we've known since he was a kid, young Elliot Smith. He got into Vedic meditation. He said he was very anxious a number of years ago, and we got his mantra and started to go, wow, I'm actually less anxious. I'm being less triggered. I'm happier. I'm actually attracting things into my life that I had never attracted before, to the point where he wanted to be teaching. So he went and spent 3 months in the foothills of Tibet to become a Vedic meditation teacher. And just in talking to people about, and because I've been doing some of this, he talks about the 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes in the afternoon, and the profound impact of being still. And then you know, this is something you guys discovered, you know, as you say, in the late 70s. But that link between the Indian yogics and this whole principle of stillness, calming the mind, stilling the mind down, and what that then does, particularly in terms of breathing and nature, how we have become so disconnected from breath, the land, country, and stillness, and how profound it is. And I say to people, just taking 3 breaths, 3 breaths in a row, particularly in nature, what that does in terms, because so I'm down the beach each morning, so that whole, and closed eyes, breath being stilled in nature, How bizarre that is. Now, one of the parts you talked about either in the book is this whole idea of the riverbanks and the two worlds connecting. And part of me reading the Uluru Statement is this whole thing around, the Aboriginal people live in two worlds at the same time. And it's something that we as whitefella have difficulty understanding. What do you mean two worlds at the same time? There's this world, our world, bank balances, credit cards. And in fact, last week, I was looking at this. Here it is in the Australian, it was the Fin Review, the Australian, the list, the 100 innovators for 2023. And you go through the trash to treasure and the meeting of the minds, co-founder of Synchron. And here she is, the X Factor, the chair of Tesla Australia after Elon Musk. And it's like, these are the people. So how do we bridge these two worlds, mate? How do we do this? Because this world's not going to necessarily go away. So how do we bridge so that everybody wins?
Look, I'm sure all the people on that list, probably are all brilliant in their own right, in their own field. Without a doubt, they've been very successful in the world as it is. And I don't know whether that means we've got 100 years left or whether we've got 80 years left or 50 years less. Next year when there's another list of another 100. That's just narrative control stuff going on in order to keep the whole system going as it is.
Right.
And that is coming to an end.
Right.
It's not going to be ended by people going out grabbing guns and shooting their leaders or chopping heads off or whatever. No, not like that. A tree that is rotten with termites falls of its own accord.
Yeah.
Yeah. So guaranteed is the complete collapse of modern civilization. Whether it's done by humans, like nuclear war, whether it's done by natural causes, meteorite strike or supervolcano or whatever, remains to be seen. But unsustainable systems in this universe are not sustained by the universe. It's a golden principle of the universe that everything returns to homeostasis or balance.
Yes.
It gets out and it comes back. So we have a choice at this point. We can recognise the reality of the ground on which we're currently standing and what that means for future generations, and say, okay, fine, just let it run. And we can all become microchipped humanoids, etc. Or we can say, okay, this system is going down, maybe in my lifetime, maybe in my kids or my grandkids or their grandkids, but this system is unsustainable. It's all too big, too big to fail. So we'll save it. It's too big to fail. Yeah. So that's when you're near the end of the process, when things are too big to fail. So it's all going down. And the question is, then how do we survive? And that's where the Aboriginal knowledge is priceless. Not that because we have to become hunter-gatherers again, we may have to for a while in those circumstances, that remains to be seen, but that's not the reason. We survive because we live together as one mob. So one mob in the Aboriginal world was classically the extended family of around 20, 25 people. 5 or 6 of those families together constituted a clan,
right?
A country group, a clan, 150 people. 150 people were largely self-sufficient, autonomous, interdependent with other clans around them to make up the tribe, or we call a nation state in our world, the big mob.
Yeah.
So that structure and that whole thing is self-governing. So 150 people is really very much the essence of autonomy in traditional Aboriginal society. 150 people is the magic number that Robin Dunbar, famous Oxford professor, discovered was the maximum number of deeply meaningful relationships you could hold with other human beings at any one time. Around 150 has become widely accepted in the sociological world as an accurate statement of the ideal group size, anywhere between 75 and 225, averaging around 150.
Mm-hmm.
So 150 people in the city, for example, or in a town or wherever, need to create a social, what is that? A society where they have shared beliefs about their worldview and the fundamentals of life. That's always the ground for a community to function effectively. There has to be an appreciation by direct experience of the nature of reality, and then the stories, songs, dances, etc., that give expression to that. So people have the bedrock of their society, and on that you build self-sufficiency and self-governance. So when everything goes down, and we could be talking within 8 years, we could be talking within 80 years, I don't know, but the best minds I've looked at very much doubt more than 100 years.
Yeah.
4 generations, not long at all. So when it all goes down, the mob of 150 that's worked so diligently for 10 or 20 years, you're thinking intergenerationally, we're not just thinking about ourselves, we're thinking about our kids, or the kids. So they have got a strong group of 150 who are able to function self-sufficiently and run their show. They're no longer dependent on the global logistics change or the banking system or the politicians in Canberra or wherever. If they have to, they've got their act together so much that they are fully capable of surviving and having a life when, everywhere else you can have anarchy. Yeah.
Because you've written, as you say in the back, a whole range of strategies in terms of self-sufficiency, as you say, waste-free, local, in-season, growing produce at home. There's a range of things you've got there, not the least of which is living simply. As you say, that list of 100 is really, as we did when we were talking about shaping culture, it's really rewarding the heroes of the culture, that is rewarding a particular narrative that is not it's not self-sustaining. If everyone was like them, the joint would be empty of food and a whole range of things.
And the heart would be empty of spontaneity and joy and meaningful physical interactions between people, instead of locked into a virtual world where it's all bullshit.
Yeah. Well, I mean, interesting enough, I noticed yesterday that Melania Trump is now doing her 3rd iteration of her prenuptial with Donald, using the present problems he has as better leverage for her escape hatch. It's like, is that how life should be? That we look for a weakness, we look for our partner to be on their knees so that we use it to leverage a better prenuptial. It's all transactional. It's there. It's hardly role modeling at that point. Mate, what haven't I talked about with you that you'd like me to talk about before we wrap up? Because we've been going over an hour now, and I don't want to take up a whole lot of your time. I know. We've been sailing along.
Well, one thing, you mentioned all the possibilities that are laid out in part 3 of the book. Now, they are there only because I put on the lenses that were given to me in parts 1 and particularly part 2, which is half the whole book, part 2, 300-odd pages. I put on those lenses to look at today's world. And looking through those lenses, this little fella's head saw those possibilities. It could be this gap year, all these things that flowed naturally from that blueprint for living that's laid out in part 2, the commonalities shared amongst Australian tribes right across the continent, the commonalities, the blueprint. They interpret it different ways, but commonalities are the same. So I put those lenses on and looked at today and the future, and these things pop out for me straight away as obviously that should be done, that can be done, that can be done. But that's just me. You can imagine 1,000 people read that book and then put on those lenses. They're going to see all sorts of things that I don't see.
Yes.
And really interesting and doable solutions. But the key is to have the lenses, to have that window right. We've got to look through the right window, the oneness window, not the window that seeks to divide and separate. Yeah. That's the traditional way of knowledge acquisition for, since Socrates, whatever, in our world. But it doesn't work.
Yeah.
It produces brilliant breakthroughs in science and technology. But in terms of the actual condition of life on this planet, it is anathema to it as applied today. Now, some of those technologies can no doubt be applied in much beneficial ways and others discarded altogether. We can't continue to poison the ocean with nanoplastics. It is a disaster. They're now appearing in human placentas, for God's sake.
That's right.
So, there's things which need to stop immediately. We can go on and on. We look at quite a few of those in Total Reset, different possibilities and so on. So there's two things. One is our personal space, our personal state of being, working on that by learning what it means to live with, to be with living country and to be on it and to make an effort every month, every few months, 3 months, school holiday time, whatever, to have that experience, to be with people who know that space. There's so many ways so many rivers to that ground at the bottom of everything. Always will be, as many as there are people on earth, basically. So we need to find our river and go with it and trust it and follow our intuitive awareness, our intuitive feeling, our Lian feeling. And it never lies. It never deceives. Country doesn't lie or deceive. You can have great gurus. I mean, Sadhguru, you talked about, is great character, very articulate. I like him in terms of he's quite fearless and sort of says it as it is, and he's probably not much loved amongst traditional Vedic swamis in India, I would think, but yeah, he's great. He's got his own interesting, fresh perspective on things, and certainly is not a monkey of manipulative powers. He just says it from his own heart, and good on him. Sadhguru.
Mate, it's been such a pleasure us catching up again, and this has happened again synchronistically by Jill Jensen, one of the women in our lifter group. She was reading your book, and because you and I literally haven't touched base probably since the early 90s that I can recall.
91. Yeah.
Really? Yeah. Unbelievable. Yeah. So it's so great that
when the book started. Literally,
I remember you writing
before I last saw you.
Yeah, mate, how incredible. Yeah. How incredible. Yeah. I think, as you say, the book becomes a catalyst, because really what it does is, you say, it's almost like one or two people in those groups of 150 people getting together and beginning conversations around how do we take this and how do we use it? Because, you and I think back, mate, as you know, there's so much I learned working with you and Rod and Larry and the team, and all along that whole principle of personal development, people turning the eyeballs inwards and realizing that the paradigm they look at the world through is not locked in concrete and is not always an empowering, helpful paradigm.
Exactly. And the more people, the more everyone does that, turn within to find the truth within about who they really are and what this is all about, the easier it is to have those discussions amongst the 150 of the potential group.
Yes.
Because you're being informed. The knowledge is coming from its source, and the source isn't a library or someone's mind, however brilliant. The source is the thing that runs the show.
Yeah,
there is nothing but that. There is only Bulgari. As the old man said to me a number of times with dismay in his face, I don't understand why Whitefellow got no dreaming.
Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah. But yet, as you say, I'm like, later on today, I'm going to be with our young August is turning 1, my grandson, the 2.5-year-old, and there's the innocence of, as you say, the Lian of the baby, the Lian of the under 3 and 4 and 5-year-olds that gets us back in touch with our own innocence and Lian. And I think, and then as age goes on, I literally spread the ashes of a good surfing mate of mine. Recently, he died of brain cancer. And he said when he was on the floor, one stage he had a number of seizures. And he said, I've made a decision, because he had a very active, intelligent, scientific mind. He said, I've made a decision. I'm going to be way less judgmental judgment is such a waste of time.
Yes.
Spending all this time judging other people
Right.
and getting angry about why aren't they
Yeah.
like this or why they like. And he said, I'm choosing to be more magnanimous. I'm going to be more grateful that
Right.
just every moment.
Wonderful.
So there he was, literally lying in his own poo, thinking he was going to die, which of course
Yeah.
by that stage eventually he knew he was going to die. But this whole thing of all these years I've spent being wasteful in judgment when I could have just been in love with everybody.
Yeah, it really is love, you know. It really is love. Yeah, I never heard the old man use the word, because he was the living expression of love.
Yes.
In our world, we have that word, you know.
Yes, yes.
But love is really it. It is, that's what it is. It's manifested out of that space.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the more we go in beyond all the judgment, all the conditioning, all the whatever it is that's happened in our life, and we go right in deep, then we disappear.
Yeah.
We disappear.
Yeah.
We become much, 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 much bigger than we ever thought we were.
And that's at the personal level. And the other thing we did with Telstra, which is a critical part of the model, is the organisational development. What systems and structures we change, because if we just talk about it but don't actually embed it with systems and structural change. So here, at minimum, if people got into groups of 5 and 10 and began having conversations around how do we cooperate better, how do we, because there's a great show on Netflix called Blue Zones where they're looking at where people are consistently living to 100 and beyond. And the Japanese have I think it's called Mian or Mai, but essentially small groups that meet pretty much every day to support each other, have a giggle and connect. That human connectedness of 10, 20 people, that sounds like a pretty good place to start to begin talking about this local total reset operation.
That's exactly right. Exactly right. The only strategy that will work is from the bottom up. And the bottom up means groups of people getting together, 10, 20, 30, 40, a good mob, a good group, and enjoying. It's not like, oh, we've got to do something or we're all going to die.
Yes.
No. It's re-establishing what it means to be human.
Yes.
With connectedness with us, with ourselves, with others, with country, bringing it all together and saying, okay, this is all we really need. So how are we going to get this one sorted?
Yeah.
And over 10 years, 20 years of lots of cups of tea, coffee, whatever, people start to realise, this is it. Now it's not difficult, in fact.
No.
What's difficult is all the obstacles that stand in the way of people becoming like the 3-year-old or like the 90-year-old. Yeah. Funny, isn't it, how when we get really old, we become like a little child again.
Yes, perfect. Yeah. Well, I'm alpha and I'm omega. I'm in the beginning and I'm the end.
Yeah, true.
Greg, and what you talking about is this whole concept of walking together. Even Steve Jobs understood the benefit of walking meetings. That's something about walking together. And as you say, walking into country together. And if you go walking into country with an elder or someone who, as you say, knows the country, that's going to take the experience to another level.
Yeah, definitely.
As well.
Definitely. And, again, Australia's not born yesterday. It's got more energy in it than any other place on earth, and we have so much country that's uninhabited even. So much. It's magnificent. Yeah. It's like, imagine having if you're a woman, the most handsome man on earth, or a man, the most beautiful woman on earth. You want to grab them and embrace them and love them, And here it is, our whole country. Just got to love it. Yeah.
Beautiful, mate. Beautiful. Greg, thanks so much for this. Absolutely beautiful, mate. There's so much, as you say, the law keepers and the languages and Bulu to Lulu to you and the book and beyond. Let's take this far and wide and let's see what else we can do to take this beyond, mate. Thanks so much for your time. If people want to get hold of you, by the way, they can go to the Total Reset website and get a copy of the book and all the details are there. I think, as you say, talk about source. Every page is sourced. All the references that are there, it's certainly not just coming out of your head. There's so much fantastic research there. So thank you so much, Greg, and we'll stay in touch, mate, and let's get this out far and wide.
Thank you, Lee. Wonderful being with you this morning, and have a beautiful day.
Thank you, mate. All the best.
See you, mate. Cheers.
Bye.